And the Pentagon has reportedly notified members of Congress that an $80 billion supplemental request to cover the cost of the war in Iran is headed their way. We knew it was coming, but this is a big price tag. Deputy Defense Secretary Stephen Feinberg first informed lawmakers last week that the request had been sent to the Office of Management and Budget. While the White House has yet to pass along the request to Congress, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was on Capitol Hill yesterday making the rounds. Pentagon leaders have warned they could run out of money this summer without a new wartime spending bill, meaning they would have to start cutting back on training exercises and other priorities. This request will likely face an uphill battle, though, as many Democrats continue to protest the use of funds for a war they say Trump illegally started without congressional approval. It's worth noting the White House has already requested $1.5 trillion for the Pentagon in the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. That's up nearly 50% from last year. But this, of course, would be a supplemental on top of their funding for this current year, not next fiscal year. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance is now the public face of President Trump's Iran deal, despite reportedly opposing the war in private. While fresh talks in Switzerland produced an interim agreement allowing UN nuclear inspectors back into Iran, key issues, including Tehran's nuclear program, remain unresolved. At this point, critics from both parties are attacking the deal. One former senior administration official told MS Now it was, quote, a complete capitulation to Iran, adding, that's just salesmanship. That's putting lipstick on a very ugly pig. Vance insists the agreement is an historic step toward avoiding what he calls forever wars, but negotiations remain fragile, with future talks expected. Want to bring in the co-author of that great new reporting, MS Now White House reporter Jake Traylor. Jake, you're touching on, I think, one of the more fascinating dynamics here, the fact that the vice president, from the very beginning of this conflict, was reported as being against going into Iran, and yet now here he is, so central to the negotiations, doing the talks in Switzerland, and also very much the public face of this, in part because of a book tour that was timed without the Iran war in mind, but very much became him answering questions about this memorandum of understanding.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating dynamic that exists here for Vice President Vance. I mean, almost a dozen White House officials and former officials have told us how much Vice President Vance dissented and was against this war initially. He now leads the charge in negotiations. He became the face of the negotiations. I had multiple officials tell me the book tour, Iran kind of co-opt tour across media last week was not intended, but ended up being the case. But multiple officials told me and my colleague David Rode how surprised they were that Vance has emerged as the individual to lead on this. One White House official told me that Rubio kind of smarted his way, kind of didn't raise his hand at the right moments because he didn't think it was possible to have a really successful outcome here that looked positively for the White House when it comes to reaching a peace deal with Iran. And so he kind of attempted to almost swerve or avoid it. This official and others told me that Vance believed real success could actually be achieved here. And a kind of interesting note here, Ali, is we've talked about how much Vance has dissented the war initially. They actually made the point that because of how much strain President Trump is under right now economically, because of how much he needs to get out of this war now, it's actually kind of caught up the president to where Vice President Vance has been all along, which is never wanting to be in this war. And so it creates this really interesting dynamic. But the most illustrative moment, I think, for this whole entire interesting representation of who is ending the war in terms from the White House perspective was the moment in Switzerland over the weekend where Vice President Vance is saying, projecting to the press and to the Iranian press as well as the U.S. and across the globe, saying there's great progress to be made. We're going to turn over a new leaf with Iran. And then literally seconds later, President Trump posting on Truth Social new threats to begin strikes again if necessary, just showing that ultimately Vice President Vance can be the lead voice on this, but President Trump from thousands of miles away, the power of the pen still really ultimately makes the decisions here.
Yeah, or the power of the Truth Social post. But it's a lesson that multiple White House administration officials in Trump 1.0 learned repeatedly. They can be the ones at the table, but they are ultimately not the ones who are making the call. And I wonder, as we look at this through the lens of 2028, Vance's future plans, but then also the way that the party itself is trying to reorient around a deal that smacks of the Obama-era deal that for the last 10 years Republicans have been railing against. Do you ultimately imagine that even if this is the deal that sticks, Republicans are able to come around to where the Vance and seemingly Trump worldview is, which is it's better for us to get out now and avoid this being a longer-term conflict, even if the deal that we've made is not the one that, you know, any of the Republicans particularly want or enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, Allie, it's a great question because that's the calculation that folks inside of Vance's cabinet and team are trying to make right now. How can we come out on top of this? And it's interesting. I've had a lot of conversations with folks in Vance world and White House officials who essentially have said that when it comes to this entire situation, Vice President Vance is what they would refer to as a top-notch communicator for the cabinet. But most folks that I spoke to conceded he's not a top-notch negotiator. He doesn't have this international foreign experience, maybe in the way Marco Rubio or others do. And so maybe he can be the person that puts the lipstick on the ugly pig, as we have that quote from that senior former administration official. But there has to be some kind of pig that's presentable to the public. There has to be something that they can at least have a point or two to say, look how things are better and different than they were before we started this war. And I mean, we've seen the bipartisan backlash day after day when there's in this 14-point memorandum of understanding, when there's still not yet a clear detail that says this is how the war was worth it. No matter how much Vice President Vance can talk his way out of things, he needs something to be able to present. And that's something that obviously through negotiations, the Vice President and the White House are hoping they can have that level of something to point to, but they don't have it right now.
Yeah, they don't have it right now, so we'll keep watching as the negotiations continue and the administration keeps selling it. You know, one of the things, and I don't have to tell you, that is hastening the administration to the negotiating table to find an end to this conflict is the fact that this is not looking good heading into the midterms. And to that point, President Trump is heading to Pennsylvania this afternoon for what's his first major public event since signing the agreement with Iran to end the war. He's going to deliver remarks at a Mack truck facility in a swing district near Allentown, where Democrats are hoping to flip back a Republican House seat this November. It comes as voters express growing concerns over affordability and Trump faces slumping economic approval ratings. Districts like the one he's visiting today are critical for the Republican Party's chances of holding control of the House. This is also typically a bellwether district that people like you and I travel a lot to, both during presidential years and during midterms, because it is typically swinging to where public sentiment actually is. And so the ideal presidential message might be affordability, but I wonder what you think we're actually going to end up hearing from the president today.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this. The president's speechwriters, his top aides are hoping he stays on message. This is a moment where threading the needle's really important. And I know that there are speechwriters that are working to really try and do that, to talk about there's not a lot to point to, but the few pieces of the economy that maybe are doing better. They want the president to hone in on that, stay away from a lot of the economic turmoil that Americans are facing, the affordability crisis the country is facing, the fact that there is this memorandum of understanding, but there are a lot of components of it that both sides of the aisle are saying are capitulations from the White House. Personally, Allie, my ticker, my clock is going to be on how quickly the reflecting pool gets brought up. I would be very unsurprised if that doesn't make a mention pretty early on today. But you're right. This is a moment for the president where his goal, I know the White House's goal, is for him to tout economic policy, to be able to point to some level of manufacturing increasing within the U.S. But it's kind of been the marker of the past year for the president. This is backed up against a real diaspora of so much more when it comes to the war in Iran, when it comes to Americans struggling with affordability. This is kind of the classic case of going into a swing state, talking to the rural local folk and trying to convince them the economy is doing better than it actually is.
And one could argue that the reason that the congresswoman who was a Democrat that previously held this district, one of the reasons that she might have lost it is because Democrats in 2024 lacked that kind of an affordability message or focus. This White House is dealing with the same things right now, and they have not shown that they are able to get more on top of it than the Biden administration was, frankly, in 2024. We're going to see what we see. MS Now White House reporter Jake Traylor, great reporting. Thank you, as always.